Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Walter Dial, tax partner Gelbin Rosenberg and Friedman. CPA is located here in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on the Exit Readiness Podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building sellable business value or transferable business value, and for planning your eventual exit from the business. We want you to be as successful in exiting the business as you have been in building it. And Walter, you and I, we're helping an owner think through key drivers of business value. That's a big part of the work that we do. And then actually, when you're performing an actual business valuation, evaluation of a business, how important is profitability?
Well, I would say profitability is the most important factor when we're looking at the value of a company. And really, the other key drivers of value are geared to increase profitability. Because at the end of the day, a buyer wants to know how much cash are they going to be able to generate in this business? What's their return going to be? And that's measured by the profitability.
Yeah, well, profitability absolutely is a key driver, and how an owner inaccurately or accurately prices their products and services has a direct impact on profitability. I think you would agree with that. I know that operating in the consulting space the way we do, offering advisory services, we're constantly wrestling with this question of pricing our services. What's too high? What's too low? What about values-based pricing? And if you don't get it right, it can devastate profitability. You'd agree with that, right?
Definitely. That's probably, especially in a professional service business, pricing, it can be difficult because on the one hand, you can deliver a service that reaps incredible rewards for the client. So they, if they see the value in that, then maybe value billing is the appropriate measure. But traditionally, especially in the CPA world, you bill based on time, which is oftentimes really not a true reflection of the value you're providing. So it's a challenge for sure. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited today about today's topic: common pricing mistakes made by business owners. And Pat, I think you and I are going to learn as much today as our listeners will. So our speaker today is Robert Fukui, founder and president of I-61 Incorporated. So over the course of Robert's career, he's been privileged to be instrumental in the launch of 6 major brands, personally responsible for over $150 million in revenue, and a recipient of national sales and leadership development awards. His successful experience in sales and marketing through ever-changing economic conditions has positioned him to be able to assist other businesses to achieve similar success in any economic environment. In April of 2016, Robert founded I-61 Inc., which is a business development network that consults and trains purpose-led businesses to be profitable and make a transformative impact in the communities, cities, and nations that they serve. Robert holds a bachelor's degree in marketing from San Jose State University and has an accomplished 24-year career in marketing and sales with companies such as Coca-Cola, Novartis Pharmaceutical, and Bristol-Myers Squibb.
Yeah, so hey, Robert, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Sure, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Before we launch into our questions, take a minute or two, if you would, and just describe the kind of work that you and I-61 are doing for your customers and clients.
Well, one of my clients and colleagues just kind of recently tagged me gave me the tagline of Profit Whisperer. A lot of things I'm a marketing specialist, I'm a marketing consultant, but the thing I look at is what's the profitability impact that every marketing decision is going to make. Too many times, consultants, especially marketing consultants, are looking at just driving sales. And through whatever instrument, whether it's through social media, SEO, regular ads, radio, whatever, and even discounting and all that kind of stuff to try and generate more customers, but they don't look at the direct impact, how it's going to look at the profitability. So I look at the entire scope of every decision you're going to make, not just marketing-wise, but even organizationally, how it's going to impact the bottom line. So at the end of the day, I help businesses increase their margin of both profit and time. They seem to go hand in hand, and it's almost like a chicken and egg thing. I need more time to get more profit, but you'd actually need more profit to get more time, because then you can hire more people to do the work. So it's kind of almost like a chicken or the egg question. And so they go hand in hand. So what I try to do is find the areas that we can immediately increase that ability to generate more profit and more time before getting more customers.
Yeah, so during the 24 years in your career in marketing and sales, big jobs, big companies, Coca-Cola, Novartis, Bristol-Myers. What's the commonly overlooked area of marketing for a business that has an impact on profitability?
Well, the most commonly overlooked area in marketing is actually pricing, because if everybody knows what the marketing mix is, anytime you're developing a marketing strategy, it relies on the marketing mix of the 4 Ps, which is product. You need a product, obviously, product or service. You need to promote it. You need to place it, meaning how do you get it into the hand of customers, whether it's in the brick and mortar or it's online and mail order, whatever. And then the last P is pricing. But when people think about marketing and plan their marketing plan, they really just think about the promotional side of things. They don't actually address the pricing part. And that's the most commonly overlooked area, because it's really the least understood. And people just try to go for, try to create some kind of formula to come up with the pricing, just trying to figure out, okay, what kind of margin do I want to make? And then based on that, they kind of just do the calculation to come up with their price based on a number of factors. And a lot of them are kind of mislead them to basically underprice themselves. And so pricing is probably the most commonly overlooked area. But for me, it's the easiest one to address and actually generate profit, because they haven't addressed it well. That most of the time, what I find is most of my clients are underpriced somewhere. It might not be across the board in all their product or service categories, but somewhere along the line, they're underpriced somewhere. So when you make that a price adjustment to what it should be based on value-based pricing, there's immediate impact on the profits, because it's not about getting more customers, it's just increasing your margin based on what you already have. And so even a 10% lift increase in profits can mean huge impact in their bottom line, depending on the kind of volume they're dealing with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Robert. So let me ask you a question. It's often, Pat and I think, and he would agree with this, are surprised when we will meet with a client either in an exit planning engagement or a business consulting engagement. And oftentimes, they don't even know if customers are profitable. So, they may know that overall their bottom line is positive. But if you ask them to break out their contracts or their customers, they couldn't tell you. They don't realize that maybe there's one who is incredibly profitable and there's a handful that are actually losing money on. And I think, a lot of time, and you kind of alluded to this in your introduction, but oftentimes consultants are looking at just driving that top line as opposed to focusing on profitability. And it's just interesting because in a lot of ways, it's easier to work on profitability than it is to work on the top line. So, have you seen situations where the business owner is kind of thinking like, look, I might not be making a lot of money right now, but if I can just increase sales 20%, I'll be making a ton of money. Does that, it doesn't make sense, but I've seen people like that. What's your experience?
That's a thought process. Yep, exactly. That's the thought process of most businesses, is if I can just generate more customers, then I'm automatically going to generate more profit. And I've seen the opposite happen when their top line goes up, where the bottom line goes down, or at least it kind of stays flat. Because a lot of times what you kind of talked about is that scenario is that there might be one product or service category that's actually losing money. And that's usually their kind of what I would call like their flagship product or service. And so they want to push more sales into that product or service category because it's more popular, it's getting them more customers, but what they're not realizing is it's actually a negative impact on their bottom line. So when you drive more customers to that product or service category, that's the thing that drives their bottom line down. They don't even realize it because they haven't broken out their profit and loss statement by category, is what you're talking about. So most of the people, they look at their profit and loss statement and say, okay, the bottom line looks, is positive. So let's just generate more sales, but not realizing if they broke out their P&L by product and sales service categories, they might find that the very thing they're trying to drive more customers to are the things that's actually holding them down. And so raise the goal plan. So that's why you have to start there. That's why a lot of people think I have they always ask me, what's your accounting background? And I said, I don't, I hate accounting, but it's a necessary evil, from the companies I work with. The marketing department had to work very closely with the finance department. The marketing wants to drive sales. The finance part wants to say, how are you going to generate profit? And so we always looked at the finance people as sometimes trying to work against us, but the reality is you have to work hand in hand. Otherwise, the company's not going to be around very long, right? So, so getting customers is great, but if it doesn't drive the bottom line, then you're going to be out of business. So the detail that we went into coming up with the price, that's most businesses just don't go through that process. And even once you come up with a price point, you need to forecast out is based on X amount of volume based on different product and service categories. What is that going to do to the bottom line? All right, so they'll come up with a price, but they won't project out.
Yeah, Robert, is there a proper formula for setting the right prices on a product or service that you can share with the listeners today?
The magic bullet.
Yeah, let's give the magic bullet.
So unfortunately, no, there's not an exact formula, and that's the number one question I get. What's the formula? Right? What profit margin should I get? I said, well, it all depends.
Well, now is a great time for you to reveal that formula right here on the Exit Readiness podcast.
Yeah,
Come on, buddy.
I'll try my best. Right. So that's why I want people to hire me. No. So, even in the same industry, one business might have to have a different margin than another one, because we're all dealing with different expenses and even different costs of goods acquisition. Right. Like, I might have a retail business competing against Walmart next door. I can't price myself the same price as Walmart because my cost of goods is higher because I don't deal with the same amount of volume, right? So I can't get the same prices in buying say a case of Coke that Walmart can. So if I try to price compete, I'm going to lose. And so that's unfortunately, so there's not a magic formula, but so value-based pricing, all goes around to the term value-based pricing. What is that? So certainly you got to take account your expenses and your cost of goods. That's the part of it. But then the value piece, that's the kind of the subjective standards. So there's objective and subjective standards of coming up with a value-based price. And so I like to use a painting example, a piece of art, a painting, a piece of art. So let's say you have an 8x10 painting. So the objective standards of how you come up with the price is going to be based off your cost of goods is basically the cost of the frame, the cost of the canvas, the cost of paint, anything else, materials and supply into making that painting, that 8x10 painting. The subjective piece is what is the value that the customer sees in this? And so, and one 8x10 painting is not the same price as another 8x10 painting, right? The 8x10 painting I paint, I definitely can't price myself the same as a Mona Lisa, which is about the same size. If you've ever seen the Mona Lisa, it almost looks like a postage stamp. I mean, it's very small. I don't know, have you ever, any of you seen it? I mean, I remember it was at the, in DC. It came through the Smithsonian. I remember I got to see it, and I'm looking on the wall for his big painting, right? And then all of a sudden, I get into this glass case, and there's the Mona Lisa is about this size, right? It's like, I don't even know if it's 8x10, maybe a little bit larger than 8x10, but count the frame, it's a little bigger. And I'm looking at this thing, go, really? I go, that's the Mona Lisa. But how much is that worth, right? And it comes down to, well, the worth is who the painter was, number one, and how people really perceived his artwork. And so, Da Vinci. So, the value piece is a subjective piece, and that's the hard piece. That's why people get pricing wrong. But the bottom line, if at the very least, you have to look at, what is the problem you're solving? What are other options for customers? And who is my ideal customer? And so if you say, if I want to price myself, let's say, just talk about just I have a keyboard in front of me. I came out a new set of wireless keyboards or Bluetooth keyboards, and I come up with a price of $50. And after all my cost of goods and all my fixed expenses, and I project out how much I can sell, am I going to be left with anything? Right. And so that's one of the things you got to look at is when you come up with a price, you got to project out based on some conservative estimates, assumptions on sales, on volume. am I going to be left with anything? And so if you just at least do that process of once you come up with the price, then project out, not saying, oh, I'm going to grow my volume 100%. And then, I'll make a profit. But let's come up with some conservative estimates and say, if I achieve this volume, am I going to make a profit? Then at least you're kind of on the right track. And you might have to make some adjustments. And then from there, it's always about tracking your profit and loss, on a regular basis. Whenever you launch a new price, you're going to want to, follow it weekly and monthly and quarterly and say, okay, am I hitting the volume? Am I not hitting the volume? And am I hitting, am I making profit? So once you make your price, you got to also then track it to say, was this the right price? Is this going to generate profit? If not, we're going to have to readjust. And so, unfortunately, it's not a clean answer, but that's my approach. Is we come up with, okay, what are your costs? What do we need to obviously break even? But then what is the value that you bring to the marketplace, and who's our ideal target market? Because one of the common pricing mistakes is to just take their cost of goods and just mark up a percentage randomly, and without projecting out and seeing if it's actually going to generate profit. They look at the competition and try to put their price point with, where they see they measure with the competition, and maybe even price themselves a little underneath them to try and generate more sales volume. But it's never looking at remember going through the process of thinking, what is the value that we're bringing in the marketplace? And maybe even getting feedback from your potential customers. Because it's actually Peter Drucker that says value is the most important question to answer, but it's the least commonly asked. What is the value that I'm bringing? And so that's the thing you really have to take the time through and really assess, what is the value that we're bringing in the marketplace, and who is the customer that really appreciates that value? Because when I have to make a price adjustment up, we're worried about pricing out customers, and certainly that can happen, but then that focuses on who is our ideal customer. Because sometimes people try to cast too wide of a net to try and get as many customers as possible. And then what happens is their marketing message has to be very generic. If I'm going after baby boomers, if my target market should be baby boomers, but I'm trying to reach everybody, then I'm not creating a marketing message that really appeals to boomers. It might appeal to millennials. Some might appeal to boomers, some might millennials, but it's not going to appeal to everyone. Let's just talk about the pictures that you might use in marketing material. You might have a group of teenagers that you're putting on your marketing material. So it's not attracting the very people that really could appreciate and even pay and afford the value of your product and service. I'm just going to stop here because I can go on forever. So I'm not sure if I know I didn't quite answer the question that everyone wants to hear is what's the formula? So I'll have to say that's a long way of saying there is none. It's because even when in Coke we had to.
Yeah. So we often see this, Robert, a business owner being fearful of losing customers if they raise their prices. What would you say about that? What should they do? How should they think through that whole category of raising prices and being fearful of losing customers?
Well, number one is you got to understand is you can't be all things to everybody. That kind of goes back to what I said earlier, is about casting too wide of a net. You're trying to reach everybody, and usually when you try to reach everybody, you reach nobody. When you're trying to reach everybody, like I said, your marketing message, your targeting is very, very generic. But when you get very targeted in your approach, then you'll get the right customer. So there's no business that I've come across, there's no business in the world, except for maybe Amazon, that can actually service everybody. Right. So that's the number one thing. They just got to get over the fact that they're trying to reach and make everybody happy in a sense. You can't. And so it's really about targeting who is your ideal customer. When you talk about service-based, business like ours, like I can't handle everybody. So I'm not going to work off of volume, and because I don't want to drive myself crazy in having to, have 29 clients. I just met a business coach has 29 active clients. I'm like, 29 active clients? How do you deal with that? So that's why he's got no life. So of course his price point must be down here. In order for him to make a living, he's got to work off of volume. And I go, why don't you just double your price? And that way you cut your volume at least in half, and then you have a life. But then, yes, are you going to lose customers? Yes, absolutely. But now you focus on the ones that really appreciate your value, and for you to understand who is it you should be targeting. Right. So number one is, are you going to lose customers? sometimes, but from my experience, if we go from a 10 to 15% price increase, we actually get the opposite. We actually get more customers because customers are smart. They understand value. And a lot of times they make value assumptions based on price. So if your price is lower than what it seems like it should be, people are going to get suspicious, right? If I offered you an iPhone 10 for $100, the first thing in your head is going to say this thing must be hot, or at least fake, right? So there's a lot of assumption that people make even on price. They make value judgments on price. So if you price yourself more to where you're worth, people are going to have, and then they see, and customers actually are smarter than you think. They see value, they understand value, they know value, and they're willing to pay for what things are worth. Now, at a certain point, are you going to lose customers? Yeah. Like I said, once you get over 15%, once you get in that 25% price increase or 50%, I've had to double prices for some of my clients. But then again, it focuses on who is your ideal customer. And we've had scenarios I had one scenario as a manufacturer that we raised prices by 86%, but we were able to cut down our volume expectations by 75% and actually make a profit for the first time as opposed to them losing money. So it's also about how much do you want to work harder or smarter? It's a question. So are you going to lose customers? You might, but that's also why we have to do projections. So we'll run some models that's like, hey, if we lost 25% sales or 50% sales, are we still profitable? If we're saying yes, are you comfortable with this? Usually the answer is yeah, because now goes back to my thing about more time margin. Now we got more time. I don't care if you're a manufacturer, or in retail, or your service space. Once you have more time to put into the production and the delivery of a product or service, your quality level increases too. When your quality level increases, then your value level increases. And then the next thing you know, you might be able to even increase price, or because of the additional profits, you're able to reinvest into more efficiencies that can bring your cost of goods down for you to be able to lower your price over time. Right? Henry Ford was a great example. When the automobiles were first being produced, only rich people can afford it. So his goal was to build a car that even his assembly line employees could afford. So how do you do that? How do you bring your costs down enough to bring your price point down? Well, he revolutionized the assembly line. Instead of taking a week to build a chassis for a typical automobile manufacturer, it took Ford only 1 day. That reduced his production by 80%. I mean, think about what it does to your costs. And now he can bring the price point down and still be profitable, right? So sometimes it's about, if you want to, service a customer that maybe can't afford you right now, maybe that's just a temporary thing. But as you're more profitable, now you can reinvest in the things that can make you more efficient to bring your costs down, which will then be able to lower your price. Right. So a lot of times, even in the short term, we have to keep our price point where it needs to be, higher just to make a profit, and then start thinking about what do we reinvest into to potentially bring our price point lower so we can now service more customers.
So Robert, we're pretty much near the end of our time. So as we wrap up, are there any other items or any other advice you'd pass along? Maybe Pat and I didn't draw you out on that you think our listeners would find helpful?
Definitely go through the exercise of understanding your value. When you understand your value and who your ideal target market, it'll really refine your marketing approach, right? Like I said, if you're trying to reach everybody, then your marketing approaches, you're all over the board. But once you get really tight in your target market with your demographic profile, and just for lack of a better, let's say you're targeting maybe millennials that are maybe are not graduate from college, but are working in a not doing like a white collar job or whatever. But when you have kind of an ideal picture of who your target audience is, now you can craft more of the right marketing message and the right marketing collateral to reach them, and the right marketing approach to reach them. So it's really about understanding your value and who is your ideal customer that really appreciates that and is going to purchase from you. And that'll really focus your marketing more effectively, and then you'll get a much better return on your marketing, because marketing, whether it's just time and money, it costs to do marketing to get customers. And so the more targeted you can get, the more likely you'll hit you'll hit your market and hit your customers. And so going through the value-based, assessment of your product and service will really help you, not just in your pricing, but in your marketing strategy overall.
That's some great advice, Robert. Thank you so much. Walter, what do you think some key takeaways for listeners are today, Walter?
I think the big one is what Robert just said, which is it's really kind of a change it's like a paradigm shift or a change in your thinking. And I know just, personally speaking, coming up in public accounting, especially in the early days as you're trying to grow your practice, the most important thing is picking up clients. And of course, and you see it the same way in your practice. And of course, early on, the definition of a qualified client is he's breathing. And then eventually, hopefully you refine that. You're no longer at that point. But it's still, I think from years of doing that, it gets ingrained in your mind that picking up clients is a good thing, which it is. But at some point, the shift has to be made in thinking of picking up the qualified client is what's important, the client that fits the practice that I've defined. And I think for a lot of, so my takeaway is to really start thinking about that. How's this client going to impact my profitability? What else are they going to bring in intangible-wise to the practice, as opposed to just, hey, great, I picked up another, X dollar tax return type thing.
Yeah, in fact, that's why I start with pricing first on my marketing strategies, because that will help me define the marketing approach. It defines who our target audience is. Especially in service business, it's usually our lower-paying client is our biggest headache. We spend more time with the lower-paying client and less time with the higher-paying client. And then I start feeling bad. It's like, wait a second, this should be opposite, right? And so I said, really, I shouldn't offer these lower prices for certain. I just really need to hold my price point so I can get more of the people that understand the worth, and I can just pour myself into these high-paying clients because they tend to appreciate it more anyway.
Yeah. So, listeners, let's focus on promoting how we're going to promote, but let's put as much time and attention into pricing, right, Robert?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Robert, thanks so much for joining us today. Fantastic content and advice. We're most grateful for you taking the time, getting up early out there on the West Coast and joining us here this morning. If anyone listening today, Robert, would like to contact you about their sales and marketing plans and how you might be able to help them, how can they reach you?
Well, right now, the best way to do it is if you go on my LinkedIn profile, I actually have 2 documents. I have a 4 Common Pricing Mistakes ebook that you can just access, and also a growth plan cheat sheet. It's a 1-page document. You can access that right on my LinkedIn profile. Otherwise, you can email me directly at R Fukui. That's Fukui spelled F as in Frank, UKUI, at the letter I, the number 61, businessdevelopment.com. So you can either email me directly or just go look for me on my LinkedIn profile, and I'm probably the only Robert Fukui on LinkedIn. So,
you know what? I think you are, Robert. I think you are. I think I know that as a fact. Okay, well, very good. Thanks, Robert. We really appreciate it. And if you'd like to reach either Walter or myself regarding building the value of your business, sellable value, transferable value, if you need a business valuation for your business, you need help planning your exit, you can reach Walter at 301-951-9090, and you can reach me at 301-859-0860. Until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Pat Ennis and Walter Dial signing off. Thank you.